Kia te ui, kia te whānau. No mai haere mai, welcome to our Facebook Live. My name is Makere. I am one of the PlunketLine nurses. And this week we are celebrating World Breastfeeding Week, and we've got our lovely PlunketLine registered nurse and international board certified lactation consultant. That's a bit of a
Mouthful?
mouthful. Tracey Tretheway joining us today to have a kōrero about when we return to work and what that looks like, and we're going to talk about how we can plan for that, and yeah, so I'll let Tracey introduce herself, and then we'll just have a kōrero and just let it flow. I'm having a little bit of internet issues, so if we get a bit of lag and stuff like that, sorry whānau, just bear with us.
Yeah. Maybe just give me a little, if you're clunking out there, Makere, that's fine. Kia ora koutou whānau, I'm Tracey. I've done a few lives now. I'm an International Board Certified Lactation Consultant, or LC, we get called, or IBCLC. A plunket nurse, and I work here in my home in Tauranga Moana, and every day I speak to māmā whānau all across Aotearoa about breastfeeding on Teams, usually as virtual consults. And exciting now because people can just book online now. We used to have to call or get an email referral, but now you can just go online, the wonders of technology, and just book yourself in, and we can catch up in the day. So yeah, as Makere said, it is World Breastfeeding Week, and we're talking about going back to work.
Yeah, so I think some of the things we're going to talk about today is, making sure that when you go back to mahi, you have a supportive workplace. We're going to talk about your rights when you're breastfeeding at work, and then some tips on breastfeeding or expressing or chest feeding when you return to work. Just so any kind of questions or anything that any whānau may have, just flick us a message. We'll kind of go through them at the end, and we're just going to let this kind of flow. A little bit about myself. I'm a māmā to 5 of my own pepe, and I have one whāngai girl. And so I've been really, really fortunate and been able to breastfeed quite successfully for 4 of my babies. My first son was pretty hard, but I also had to return to work and even study with an 8-week-old baby, and then 8-month-old baby, 9-month-old baby, 15 months. So
Wow.
yeah, a few times. So yeah, I understand the stress about it, and I was very fortunate and have always been really fortunate. I've got a little bit of a village around me, and I've been very lucky to have some supportive places where I work that are really, really been awesome at kind of allowing me to talk through it with them what my plans were and help me with that.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a busy nurse on a ward when I went back. My babies were 6 and 9 months, so yeah, I did the whole pumping in the changing room. When I worked in the surgical ward, pumped in the changing room when I could, and then yeah, I worked in the maternity ward, so I just was able to use a pump in the maternity ward. It was a little bit easier, but at work we always have our best laid plans, and it's great to have the support systems around us. And I often find that going back, the thought of going back, the planning, the wondering how it's all going to work out is the most stressful part. And then
Yeah.
once we kind of get back into it, what's going to be is going to be, and it all falls into place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. So I guess one of our first kind of subjects would be why supportive workplaces are so important to allow mama to continue breastfeeding. So one of the biggest reasons women stop breastfeeding early is because of work. So we want to be able to, because the World Health Organization recommends breastfeeding up to, it's now changed to 2 years, isn't it?
Exclusively for 6 months, and then alongside
Oh,
solids for 2 years and beyond. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, so and a big part of our mahi at Plunket and PlunketLine is, giving that information to whānau so they can continue breastfeeding.
Yeah. And so, what a supportive workplace looks like is being able to have a conversation with your boss when you have your baby about what time, when you're going to go back, when you plan to go back, where you will be able to, if you're planning to pump, where you'll be able to pump when you're at work, where you'll be able to store that milk. Um, and, and so, that's kind of what a supportive workplace looks like, a supportive employer that says, yep, all right, what do you need and when do you need it, and then we can kind of figure it out around it. And then, because it's your legal right to continue to breastfeed when you're at work, and so your employer is legally obligated to provide you with a safe space, a clean space, storage to store your breast milk in, and the right to have those as unpaid breaks, as many as you need, and then to reconsider that as the time kind of goes on how much you need. So for some women, that means that added time is done to their day. So maybe an 8-hour day with, 3 15-minute unpaid breaks adds to another 45 minutes at the end of the day. Others can work it inside their already given breaks. So it's all about having a good conversation with your employer. And I've helped mums who are just, they say, yes, I know it's my right, but
Mm.
I just can't do it at work. It's just not going to work with what I do in my work life. And then I've had mums that are like, oh, my boss is so great, baby comes in, I can leave when I need to, and we've all just figured out this thing. So yeah, having a good conversation with your employer, and then coming up with a plan on how your workday is going to look so that you can continue to breastfeed, and pump if you need to, is really important.
Yeah. What would be some of your tips on pumping? Because sometimes pumping can be there's a bit of an art to it, and a bit of a, it can be really hard and challenging for some mamas or parents. How would you kind of talk a parent through that?
Yeah. So when mums come to me, there's different stages of their journey. They might have just had their baby, but they're planning on going back at 6 months, and so
Mm.
they're asking me what they need to do. And then I have the mama who are at 6 months, and they're like, I have to go back to work, like now, and I can't pump, and I can't do this. And then I have, but it also is different. I'm going back to work, and my baby's 9 months or a year old. So, how pumping's going to go, and what your work day is going to look like is really dependent on the age and stage of your baby, for sure. But if you do need to pump, in order to get a bit of a stash for
Yeah.
your milk supply for your fridge for when you do go back to work, so you've got a little bit banked up, then pumping it's best to start kind of once breastfeeding's well established. So after your kind of 6 weeks and into your third month, if you haven't needed to pump up until 6 weeks, but you're planning on getting a bit of a stash, then starting to pump afterwards. And if you've pumped the whole way through, it's just about making sure you're not oversupplying and causing extra issues for yourself, because at the end of the day, if you bank 20 mils a day, that's going to add up quite quickly over a period of months.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so the key things with pumping is getting the right pump for you. I have mums that exclusively hand expressed, because that's the way that they could get their milk off.
Yeah.
They literally hand express bottles of milk. Um, I've had mums that use a manual pump and mums that use an electric pump. So whenever mums are talking about pumping and wanting to get a pump, I always say, if you can, ask your mates, ask your whānau, what pumps they have, what do they recommend, and if they let you, clean it and give it a crack yourself and find the one that works the best for you.
Yeah.
And then once you've decided which one you're going to do, make sure you get the right size flange. So that means having a look online at the size guidelines, but in general, you basically measure your nipple from one end to the other, and that gives you kind of an idea on how what size flange you should use, because if it's too big, then you'll draw too much tissue in. If it's too small, you'll kind of strangle the nipple. So that can affect how much you get off. Using your hands as well as a pump can get a little bit extra off. Doing a combination of regular pumping and power pumping can help get a little bit extra off. Most of the time we produce bigger volumes of milk in the early parts of the days. So often I recommend, if mums want to get a little bit of milk stored up, that they pump after one of the first feeds of the day and then use that, because as the day goes on, it can get harder and harder to kind of get some more higher volumes off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I used to do. I would pump after my first baby's feed in the morning, and then I would get a really good bottle done, and then I'd know that I'd had some for the lunchtime feed, and then I could pump off at lunchtime while baby had that one, and then got home from my and I could feed again. So
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember when I did afternoon shifts, I would try and pump and I would get like 20 mils. My baby was only like 7 or 8 months old, but just because of the time of the day, in the afternoon, but I would just wait. And then as soon as I walked in the door, I'd get her up out of bed and get her to do it properly.
yeah,
So yeah, it's really different for everyone. But the other thing about pumping is it's not fun. Like, we don't, especially if you're busy at work, sitting there like, hurry up, I want you to come out so I can get on. Or pumping at home can be a little bit of a drag. And so it's a good idea to distract yourself or take
yeah,
the time to actually have a break. It's a break. So take the time to have a break. Whether if you're at work and you want to talk, if you can video call with your husband, or maybe bring up some photos of your baby on your phone, or
yeah.
chat to someone on the phone, or put some headphones on, listen to some music and just kind of chill out, or do some deep breathing or whatever, just anything to distract yourself from the fact that you're pumping, and to really get the good hormones flowing so that it lets down and flows a bit easier.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good tip. Got to get that oxytocin going, eh? So sometimes
Yeah.
just listening to some good sounds and having the baby photo or the hubby in front of you is a good little tip. Cool.
Someone said to me they used to like, I just used to think of the little toes, my
Oh,
baby's little toes, and then just like really focus on just those tiny little aspects of your baby and picturing it in your brain. So it's kind of like a mindfulness, but very
yeah,
baby themed, to sort of help get the oxytocin flowing.
yeah. And what about whānau who might be having a little bit of trouble with the breast and the bottle, like expressing, and if baby's not really, taking the bottle, and the stress that goes around that too.
Yeah. So when mums are in their really early stages and they're asking me about, should I start a bottle? When do I start a bottle? Or I have to go back to work, so I'm going to start a bottle. Then my advice is to kind of keep the bottle a consistent kind of feature of their feeding right from, those early days. So once breastfeeding is really well established, if you need to go back to work, specifically if it's a like full time, not just a day or two, and especially if your baby's under 8 months old, so there's a big chance that they will need a bottle while you're at work, then it's good to keep that bottle as a feature, because a brand new baby might go between the breast and the bottle um, reasonably easily. But as babies get older, if you can think about how many developmental skills they really consolidate in those months, they really consolidate their method of feeding in those first couple of months as well. So they may have taken it when they were little, under 2 months, and then you're like, sweet as, they can take it, and then you don't give it for a month, and then you go to give it and they no longer know what to do with it. They literally put it in their mouth and like, what's this thing? And it's because they've really they've really consolidated the breast. And it's the same with the bottle, and that's kind of what we call that bottle and breast confusion, is
Yeah.
because but I think the biggest thing that mums think is they have to replace a whole feed in order to
Mhm.
keep the bottle going, but you don't. You just need a practice bottle. So what I mean by that is you don't have to pump a whole feed and then maybe the 3 o'clock feed, your husband or your partner gives 150 mils and you just don't breastfeed at that time, you pump. You just need a practice bottle. So once a day, 20 mils in a bottle. Once every second day, 30 mils in a bottle, once every
Yeah.
third day, whatever, but just keeping one little practice bottle
Yeah.
often throughout the baby's week, it means that when you need them to, you can chuck a bit extra in there, 50, 60, 80, if you need to skip a feed. But it just keeps that skill going. So that's what I always recommend when we're in the early stages and we're planning. So, but commonly what I get is they took a bottle in the early days.
Yes.
Now my baby's 6 months and I've got to go to work next
Yeah.
month and she
Yeah.
will not take a bottle.
Yeah.
And that's a really tricky situation.
Yeah.
Um, so my advice there is always, we have to introduce it like a new toy.
Yeah.
So instead of like, I'm hungry, what is this thing that you're handing me? We've got the boob here. You have to make this a new curious toy because they are curious about new things. So placing the bottle teat as part of their toys to play with, um, or holding the bottle and having it in their visual, because I often get to the point where mums say they just pull the bottle out, the baby sees it, and they're like, nope,
Yeah.
I am not doing this again because it's been tried so long.
Yeah.
So we now have to bring it in as something that's fun, something that's new, something to be curious about, and it doesn't have to have any milk in it to start with. So breastfeed, have the bottle frequently in the baby's vision field without the pressure to drink from it, and then let them pick up the teat, get it near their mouth,
Yeah.
and once you kind of don't get that, no, I'm not going to do this
Yeah.
reaction,
Yeah.
then you can start putting a
Yeah.
little bit of milk in there and seeing if they will let it kind of go in their mouth and figure out
Yeah.
that's what it is. But then when you do it, you have to be fun with it as
Yeah.
well. So if they go, no, you can go, oh, what are you doing? Or giggle,
Yeah.
because you want to keep them,
That
you want to
positive.
keep as many of that
Yeah.
positive response
Yeah.
around the bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always like to
So
think of it as, we have, if I was to have something in my face that I didn't like, someone's going, hey, Makere, they've got this, have it. I would be like, no, get it out. I don't want it. And it would just make me more and more frustrated. So I always
yeah,
try and, find our mamas and papas, that's the same thing. If your baby's saying they don't want it and you keep it in their face, they're just going to get more and more frustrated.
yeah, for sure. And if you're really hungry, it's kind of like, because babies go, when they're really hungry, it doesn't take much for them to be really hungry. And I always say, imagine if you were hungry, you hadn't eaten all day, and then you get handed a plate with a steak on it, or a beautiful big baked potato, and they give you one chopstick and they say, there you go, eat it. So sometimes when a baby's breastfed and you present them with a bottle, they're like, what am I supposed to do with that? I'm hungry here. So that that's like a kind of an analogy. And this the other way around, when babies have gotten used to taking a bottle, and we're trying to get them back to the breast. But anyway, that's a topic for a different of a
Go down a
different
rabbit
night.
hole.
But
It's rated.
yeah, yeah, I fall down rabbit holes all the time. But yeah, so gentle and often
Yeah.
and frequent exposure, and sometimes the odd sleepy feed. So you get them to the point where they're really sleepy, or it's nighttime, or they're even asleep, and then you just get them to slowly start sucking on the bottle and drinking the milk, because sometimes that's how you can get into them if you really have to. Yeah.
I think I'm just thinking of some real frequent calls we might get. And I know, a lot of parents really struggle with it. Is my baby going to go hungry? Are they going to be, is this going to be enough for them? What kind of advice would you give around that?
Yeah, so babies are keyed for survival, but they are also really, they're really set in their ways. So, I always think of an example. I had a mum that got very unwell. She was trying to get her baby to take a bottle, and she couldn't get her baby to take a bottle, just refused.
Yeah.
Exclusively breastfed baby. But then she got very unwell and she was hospitalized, the intensive care, so all of a sudden the breast was completely unavailable to that baby, and the whānau had to get this baby to take a bottle, and they did have a day or so of a real difficult time getting small amounts, and the baby was quite unsettled, but eventually survival kicks in, and they and she started taking it, and she started taking it fine. And I never advocate that as a way for whānau to get a baby to take a bottle when they're going back to work, because it's a very intensive, stressful for you, for the whānau, for the mother, for the parent, and for the baby. But it's also, it's not like we've put them in a corner and said, you know, you have the bottle there. They're with family, so they're going through something really hard, like, I don't have the breast anymore. I've got my milk and I'm hungry, and the breast isn't here and my mum's not here. But I'm not going through it alone. I'm being held, I'm being loved. Someone's helping me through this crisis that I'm having, because they're not giving me, because I'm not able to have the breast.
Yeah.
And so, that's different to being left in a cot, like they talk about, and letting babies cry on their own, where that can interrupt their kind of brain development and things like that. But when they're going through something like that, so yes, it is, you can kind of be a bit tough in that way. They won't go hungry. But the reason why a lot of people don't opt for it is because it's stressful, and it makes it a bit, that sound and our instincts, it goes against all of our instincts to do it unless we absolutely have to.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Um, I think that's too when, like, you can also have conversations, with your employer and stuff like that as well, and kind of come up with a little bit of a plan if it's something that was pretty,
Yeah,
meaningful
yeah.
for you. Something like that, yeah.
And and it's a good idea to share the load too. So, like, if you are trying to get your baby to take a bottle, and some of it's actually has to be the breastfeeding parent that gives the bottle. The baby won't take it for anybody else. And then there are other times where it's like, actually leave them with Nana, leave them with Dad, leave them with a mum, and so that they can, and so someone else does it.
Yeah.
And sometimes, because another person will come up with their own kind of strategies, but also maybe a little bit calmer, or there's less pressure for it to happen. So, yeah, just try lots of different things as well.
Yeah. What about with storing in that, like with the frozen milk, and if you were just to put it in the fridge or leave it out, what would the recommendations and kind of advice would you give around that?
Yeah, well, on Plunket, on our website, we've got those great storage guidelines on how long they can stay in the deep freeze, in the freezer, and the fridge, and at room temperature for. But my recommendations is always to not freeze breast milk, as if you're doing more than kind of 20 mils, in more than 20 mils. So, like in those freezer bags, you can freeze like a whole 50, 60, or 120 mils at a time. But actually, a lot of times when babies have breast milk in a bottle, they don't actually take a really big volume at a time. They take smaller volumes often. So if you froze 120, if you defrost 120, then you have to use it all or throw it away. So I always recommend freezing it in and just get some clean ice cube trays, freeze it in that, and then when you freeze it in the freezer, it's just like some of them you can buy lids, you can actually get lids for. Otherwise, put it somewhere where nothing can kind of fall into your milk while it's frozen, and then you've got lots of little ice cubes. You'll know how much. Say one tray is, has 12 ice cubes in it, and that's 120 mils. So you'll know about how much mils each ice cube is, and then put that into a sealable bag and write the date and the time that milk was frozen. And that way, when whoever's going to give baby the bottle, they can take out, a handful of ice cubes at a time. And when you defrost breast milk, you can pop your little ice cubes into your bottle, and then get near boiling water, so very hot water, into just a bowl, and then just rest the bottle with the frozen ice cubes in it, and let it defrost and then heat up. Otherwise, you can pop those ice cubes and just like you do with everything else, pop it in the fridge, let it thaw out, and then heat it up in the same way. But yeah, try and freeze it in small volumes so that you don't, to really minimize the wastage.
The liquid gold.
Yeah.
That's a good tip. Yeah, I like that one. I might use that one when I've got fun.
Yeah.
Because they come in the big bag, so you feel like you have to fill the big bag up.
Yeah.
Because you just feel like, oh, I'm going to waste it. I have to fill the big bag. And then you automatically think, because it comes in a big bag, that your baby has to have that big bag. So that's really good to know, that 20 mils more frequently. Yeah.
Yeah. And and it's the same when when mums are back at work and they take along some frozen milk to their daycare centre. You get them to use it, but also use it in the smaller blocks that they need to avoid any wastage.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
another part. So I think sometimes you think that it might be whānau looking after, but what about the ECE kind of, like if you're going back to work, we've got that sorted. But what about, what kind of advice would you give about ECEs and daycares, and like what's the parents' rights there? And have you got any tips or anything around that kind of stuff?
Well, mums who work at ECEs, it's great. Their baby, is with them at work. So I've had mums who work at ECEs that yeah, they just breastfeed their baby. They tend to not work in the same room as their baby to avoid that kind of confusion for the baby. But a lot of them, yeah, they can just breastfeed there. When you're sending frozen milk off to ECEs, just making sure that they're storing your milk in their fridge. It goes in with food. It's a food, not a body fluid, so it goes in amongst the food, the other kai, and making sure that it's really well labelled so it doesn't get mixed up. The good thing is that most ECEs are well experienced with handling and using bottles and giving babies bottles and using express breast milk, so they tend to be pretty clued up. But it's definitely good to have a conversation and make sure that they are, and sort of let them know how much you want, what you want them to do. If you live close by to a ECE, if you work close by to your ECE, then you may take a break and go to the ECE and breastfeed your baby in your work break. And sometimes we have whānau who bring babies in. I remember a doctor, and whenever she was on shift, and then her husband would be on the phone, and he'd come in with the peppy, and and she'd feed her on the ward, and then he'd take her home, and she'd kind of go on with it, because doctors work long shifts. So getting someone to bring peppy into work, or if you have an ECE that's really close by, then you may even be able to nip down and breastfeed. in your break.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what I used to do. It was nice to get that little oxytocin hit from baby as well and get your sniffs and cuddles in.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Cool. I think we've talked about quite a few things here. Was there anything else that you can think of that you wanted to kind of tips or anything like that, or anything that you think we might have missed out? I think we might have a conversation about formula as well.
Oh, yes, yep. So some mums struggle to express enough in order to have breast milk at their work, or they choose to transition to some formula and some breast milk. So when it comes to formula, I always recommend get the one that's the most cost effective and the most readily available, and start with a cow's milk based formula. And if you're planning on going back to work and using formula, then it's always a good idea to get it started a bit beforehand, and just have a little bit of a flavor sort of test, and see how your baby responds to that formula. So you may introduce it just as half a feed or a small amount of 20 or 30 mils, and then kind of increase it up to maybe whatever one scoop is, which is usually 50 or 60 mils, and just kind of have one of those a day or one of those every couple of days, just to see how your baby responds to the flavor and responds to the formula itself. Um, the key things for using formula, if you want to continue to breastfeed most of the time, but use formula instead of expressing at work, then I think the biggest misconception, one, because mums are like, I don't want my baby to go hungry, of course, but formula volumes are set at the higher kind of level of normal. So if you have a 6-month-old and it says that they need 180 mils of formula, if they're having a feed at kohanga, and they may only need, I always say start with just 100, instead of 180, start with 100. And instead of trying to get your baby to have the whole amount, really use like a responsive bottle feeding. So you're watching the baby's cues to see when they're full, just like they do at the breast. When they're
Yeah.
starting to get full, they start to relax. So while they're having their bottle, just see at what point they start to get full, and you most of the time will find that it's not at those high volumes of 180. It's more likely, your 80 to 150. And the key with that is that if you feed responsively with the formula when you're away from your baby, then it protects your baby's appetite for your breast milk when they come home. Because if they take the same volume every day, then if they take 240 mils of breast milk of formula when they're at daycare, so 2 bottles of 120, they'll come home, and have the 600, 700 from you in those times that you're all together. But if they have, 200, 400, then that can be almost 50% of their daily intake. So then
Yeah.
they might take a lot less from you. So your body will start to down regulate. So when you're using formula, get the one that's the most cost effective, the most easily available,
Yeah.
and then bottle feed your baby responsively. So observe for their cues to show you when they're full, and that way you'll gauge about what volume you need, which is usually a lot less than mums think. And then, just trying it a little bit for the taste and to see how your baby processes it before you start work.
Cool. Yeah, I think we have some really awesome advice on our PlunketLine manuals and things like that as well for supporting whānau with transitioning from breast milk and bottle refusal and things like that. So whānau, give us a call at PlunketLine. We do have heaps and heaps of little tips there as well. I think it was a really important one too, that kind of what parents being worried about their supply as well if they're going to work and things like that, and the supply dropping, or introducing formula in there, and do they have to stop breastfeeding and things like that. So I think that's really cool that you covered a bit of that. Is there anything else you can kind of give, like, to give parents a little bit more reassurance on the supply kind of thing as well when they're going to mahi?
The hard part is that there's no magic there's no magic formula. And as I said, it's different to a mum that's going back to work 4 days a week and has a 5-month-old, to a mum that's going back, say, 4 days a week and has a 10-month-old, to a mum that's going back 2 days a week. So your individual circumstances is really going to come into it, because your baby's age and stage, a 6-month-old predominantly still has milk feeds, and so will
Yeah.
need a lot more milk. But a 9-month-old whose mum's working 2 or 3 days may get away with just eating their food, their kai, water, and having a little bit of mum's milk if they will take it, and then mum can just breastfeed the
Yeah.
rest of the time that she's there. But the key things to keeping your supply, when you're breastfeeding and working, is to do lots of breastfeeding when you are together at home, which might mean that your baby feeds a little bit more at night when you very first go back, because they're wanting to get a bit more in before the day when you guys aren't together. So lots of breastfeeding all the other times when you guys are together. And when you're at work and your baby is needing a supplement, making sure that if you're using not your breast milk, so you're not pumping at work and keeping that volume up, if you are needing to use a bit of formula, that you try to give as little as you possibly can, and really responsively bottle feed, so that when baby's back with you, you can feed straight away as soon as you get home. And yeah, taking care of yourself is always a really important one. When we're busy mums, when we're busy parents and we're working, you can start to get a bit stressed and start to feel a bit run down. And so you need the village, to help you out in that instance. Yeah,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
keep yourself well.
Cool. I think we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, that kind of came into our question, didn't
Yeah.
it?
Oh, yeah. One of them was, I'm interested to know whether a 9-month-old can go during the day without a fit. Yeah. If still having a morning bedtime and 2, but ideally get that down to 1 night feeds, hasn't taken to formula, or will have 30 mils or so. And also about going away from baby for a night or 2 to a few nights, how much to pump so supply stays up, please, and thank you. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered that.
Yeah.
Is
So I'll just talk a little bit more, maybe specifically,
Yeah.
because a 9-month-old is having 3 meals and water and can have snacks. So if hasn't taken to formula, or will take 30 mils or so, then I would just offer that 30 mils here and there, but can probably go with just food and water, and then have a breastfeed before, straight before, and breastfeeds straight after. I mean, it's yeah, for a 9-month-old, yeah, you can get away with just doing 30 mils here and there of formula or express milk if you've got it, and then just lots of kai and water, and then lots of breast. But unfortunately, like trying to get it down to 1 feed, if she hasn't or he hasn't really taken to formula and just having little 30 mils kind of here and there, then will most likely make up for it by having lots of extra breastfeeds when you guys are together. So it might mean that, yeah, they still want to do 2 big breastfeeds at night.
Yeah. And what
Yeah.
about the or going away and things like that? What would you advise?
So going away overnight, if he has 2 night breastfeeds, then I would probably try a bottle feed at night to see how he goes, and especially with the non-breastfeeding parent, try and get to give a bottle just to kind of lessen the blow for the person who's looking after the baby, just to see how the baby responds to it. But if you were going away overnight, you would probably, and they had 2 feeds, you'd probably need, a minimum of 200 mils, but probably a little bit more. But it's honestly probably more to do with the person that's looking after the baby at night. Because if the baby wakes up and is offered a bottle and takes a little bit, but they might be a little bit unsettled. So as long as that person can manage and give lots of cuddles and try and get baby off to sleep and offer little bits often in the night, then they'll probably be fine. But yeah, it's actually more to do with the person that's
Yeah.
looking after the baby. Have all the milk available for them for sure, but it's about maybe doing a practice run in your own home first, and then maybe but yeah, some babies would probably just look at them and go, okay, well, you're not my mum, but you're Nana, and what are we going to do? And all right, I'll have a little bit of that, but then I'll just need some cuddles to get back off to sleep. I'll just wait for mum. Thank you very much. And others might, be a bit unsettled.
Yeah, definitely. How to stop breastfeeding? I'm near 12 months. That's one of our questions.
Yep. So at 12 months, if you're breastfeeding and you'll be breastfeeding and giving some solids. But if you're formula feeding as well as breastfeeding and giving solids, then at 12 months you don't have to go on to a follow-on formula. You would just
Mm,
go on to food, water, and a cow's milk or a milk alternative after 12 months. So the key things for weaning is to do it sort of quite slowly.
yeah,
So especially in the early days, at 12 months, perhaps not so much, but there'll be a feed in the day that you kind of think, oh, sometimes baby wants it and sometimes they don't, or they always only have a little feed at that time. So that would be the first one that I would just drop and just not offer it and just carry on with your day. And then after a week or so, try and find that next feed that you could probably drop, and then do the same thing. Just don't offer it and carry on, and just kind of keep going that way until your body and your baby kind of adapts to no longer sitting down and having a breastfeed. A lot of the time at this age, the over 1-year-old and toddlers, they often breastfeed off to sleep, or they have a breastfeed when they wake up to settle themselves. So a lot of the time at that kind of for that kind of weaning, it's about gently replacing it with another kind of soothing
yeah,
technique, and using language that babies can understand. So babies don't understand, actually, I've decided that we're stopping this now. It's a difficult decision that I've made, but I think that this, like they don't understand it, but they do understand, oh, stuck, so like, oh, like I can't, mummy's, it's stuck, so an over a 1-year-old might learn what stuck is, but if mum shows that, oh, she can't get into her top to give baby the breast, and then do something different, that's kind of tapping into something that a baby will understand. Or like when we finish a book and we say all finished, or when they eat their kai and we go all gone, or no more, so we've used that kind of language before to indicate that it's gone. So we can use that kind of language about breastfeeding as well for the older baby, like all gone, or all finished, to try and communicate to the baby that that's kind of coming to an end. But yeah, usually just gradually, so that your body can do it slowly without running into any complications, but also gradually, and sort of diverting your baby's attention to a different settling technique, a different activity that you can do together. Or so don't sit in the place where you usually breastfeed, sit somewhere else. Don't sit down at that time, divert, distract
yeah,
their attention, and do something else until it starts to become um, the thing that we don't sort of do anymore. Yeah.
yeah. I think their age is such a cute age too, because like their little brains are like little sponges and they pick up so much little keywords and language and things like that. So it's a really cool opportunity to kind of add that to it as well. And I remember my sister-in-law, when she stopped breastfeeding about that age, she put plasters on her nose. Ouchie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all gone, all finished. Yeah, that's a funny one. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah.
Put flowers on there, like, ouchie, no more.
It could,
But it's about
yeah.
it's finding something that the toddler will understand, because we can't explain. Yeah, yeah, um, yeah, yeah. That's very good.
I think it kind of comes into the next question too, which is sort of support around needing to finish, kind of, but then also that would be about age as well. But the next question was, is there support for needing to stop feeding suddenly due to medical reasons?
Definitely is. Yeah,
Yeah,
especially if you're in the really early days, when you're when you're producing a full supply before 8 months, before 7, 8 months, then stopping breastfeeding quite suddenly can hold you at risk of inflammation in your breast and things like that, and is of course much harder for a baby to stop it quite suddenly. So there definitely is support for that. That would be something that I would, work, one-on-one with someone to help them if they needed to stop it quite suddenly like that. But for the example that I gave earlier, that baby was a young baby, not yet on solids, and mum was seriously unwell and couldn't breastfeed. So it was quite a intervention
yeah,
style way to do it for the whānau. But for her, because she was so unwell, you know, the body just sorted it out for her. But if it was because mum needed to go on medication, or that is not, not okay to breastfeed with, then yes, it would be about how do we stop it without giving you any mastitis and things like that.
yeah. And I think that's the thing, we have an amazing service on PlunketLine, the video calls, with the lactation consultants, and are free for everybody. So, give us a call and you
Yeah.
can book one anytime. Um,
And on that I was going to say, sorry to interrupt, on
yeah,
that medical note, a lot of mums come to me and say, I'm taking this medication, which means I have to stop breastfeeding. And actually, it's quite compatible with breastfeeding, and so
yeah,
it's actually a really good idea if you have been told that you have to stop breastfeeding because of a medication, to get a bit more advice around that, because I've had that happen more times than I would like.
yeah. I after I had my son Martina, I was very unwell, and I ended up having to have two surgeries. And I think Martina was only 9 days old, and the hospital staff at the hospital when I had him was so amazing. I was so worried about breastfeeding my newborn baby, and they were just so supportive. And I was on all these medications, and they had expressed milk there for him so my husband could feed him then. And then they brought him in while I was hooked up to everything, and let my mum, my husband, and baby stay in maternity ward. They brought baby to me. So it was something that was really like, they knew how passionate I was about continuing to breastfeed and being there for baby. So they did everything they could to help me and support me through that. So I think sometimes we might be a little bit scared to say something or voice that, but if you can, do it, because you just don't know
Yeah.
what you can do.
Yeah, and that's what I tell mums, like, you picture if we have a really prem baby and mum's really sick and in ICU and she's had a cesarean section. So we've got a prem baby, so a very vulnerable baby. We've got a mum in ICU's hooked up to all sorts of medications to help pain, including morphine, all of the, some pretty heavy killer painkillers, but also maybe some medications for blood pressure and fluids and stuff. We would still give her prem baby her milk. So if you think of that scenario, then there's not too many other than like chemotherapy
Yeah.
type drugs and some contrasts that you can't have and breastfeed. Yeah, and whenever I talk about weaning, I also think that it's really important to know that when you wean, your body does go through a chemical change. So when weaning happens, there are hormone changes in your body that will give you a natural low. So similar to, you know, us women, we you know, with our hormones, we all know about good hormones and hormones that make us feel low. Well, when we stop breastfeeding and we start to lose a lot of the hormones that are associated with breastfeeding, then our body will go through a natural low. So regardless of if you wanted to give up and your baby's 2 years old and you've come to the end, or if you had to give up, there will be a sense of you know, you will feel upset, you might feel down, you will start to think, did I do the right thing? And it's a physical change, chemical change inside your body, that does that to you.
Yeah, yeah. I've been for that a few times. Yeah. Oh. But I think the other thing is, you know, always look forward to those next stages of baby's life because they're forever changing. I'm
Yes.
still gobsmacked by my 15-year-old some days. So,
Oh.
um,
Oh.
I think we have a question here too about when you was talking about the frozen ice blocks.
Yep.
So would 20 mils be too little for a 7-month-old? Does it need to change as they get older? When we were talking about the 20 mils breast milk.
No, I would. You could start with 20 mils for a 7-month-old, and then just build up from there. Yeah, yeah. 20 mils is a good practice bottle for sure.
Okay. I think we just have another couple of questions. I think we're nearly at our time too.
Oh yes.
I know, I waffle. My girl is 9.5 months, 8 months adjusted, and she's at ECE and still fully breastfed, expressive breast milk fed. She currently has 3 to 4 bottles at daycare, ranging from 100 to 160 mils per bottle. Is that normal? She breastfeeds at home mostly, so hard to know how much she is actually getting.
It sounds great. 3 to 4 bottles, 100 to 160 mils, and at that age and range, that's good. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So you know, what's normal is very dependent on you and your baby. So at the end of the day, at 8 months adjusted, because that's what we always do when we look at babies, an 8-month-old will be just starting to have food first, so would probably still be having within the range of 700 to 900 sort of mils of breast milk total a day, but will start to probably go down once they hit 9-10 months. So that's so what's normal for you will be different to what's normal for others. But that sounds as if she's happy and growing and thriving and starting to enjoy a good variety of food at that 8 months and breastfeeding, and you're
Yeah.
keeping up, then yeah, that sounds very normal for you
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think our last question is, can you recommend a wireless breast pump that's quiet and pumps good enough for a working mama?
Oh, kia ora. Kia ora. So the wireless, so I'm guessing you mean the portable pumps. In my experience, they don't pack as much punch as the other electric breast pumps on the market. But when it comes to brands, you know, mums will go, this one works really well, and then another mum will be like, this one doesn't work as well for me. So if you're going to go the wireless way, or the portable breast pump way, again, I would say see if you can hire one or borrow one, and just have it so that you can practice with it, see how much you get off, and see if you can compare that to your trusty old hand pump, or another kind of pump, or whether that portable pump, because some of them, you know, they work perfectly for some mama, and for others they can get about half or a lot less than what they can with their other pumps. So with any kind of pump recommendations, unfortunately, there's not one that I think works better than the other. It's always about try a few, figure out a method that works best for you, whether it's making it go fast, slow, or just fast, slow, or just slow and back to fast, and always making sure that it's the right size. So if you can, put it out there to your community and say, who's
Yeah.
got a portable pump? Can I borrow it? See how it works for me.
I guess it's a hard thing too because there's so many things on the market.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just kind of get really you know, you want the best because everyone wants the best for their baby, and you want something, you know, especially because of how expensive they are too. So
Yeah. But there's lots around too now, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. Thing, ask around, and I find that there's a lot of like most communities, they have a lot of online mum groups in that as well, on Facebook
yes.
and things like that. And I think breastfeeding pages where they support milk and all sorts of things. So jump on there and ask as many questions as you can. And the one thing I know about mamas and working on the phones is, you know, we all just want to help, and we've all got so much advice to give. And yeah, so yeah, reach out to your community and have her ask around for sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, we jumped in with one last question before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Hi, Jessica. I think I might have talked to Jessica before. So what's power pumping? So power pumping replicates the cluster feeding. So you know how we talk about cluster feeding or the witching hour, where a baby will feed, feed and then break, feed and then break, feed and then break. So power pumping replicates a cluster feed. So what you do is you put your pump on for 5 minutes, off for 5 minutes, or on for 10 minutes, off for 10 minutes, on for 10 minutes, off for 10 minutes. And you do that over, say, an hour. And it's to replicate that cluster feeding. And some mums find that can help get a little bit of a higher yield of milk than just sitting on there for 20 minutes solid. And the fast slow thing is because when we teach mums to pump, and most pumps come with a setting that they do, it does like the massage setting, short burst, and then it goes into the long drinking section. So quite often mums get stuck in that. They just put it on, let it go fast, and then slow, and then finish. But I encourage mums to tutu with it. So because it might work that it goes fast and then slow, and then after maybe 3 minutes of going slow, you start to notice that it eases off a little bit. So try flick it back to fast again and see if that helps to get another letdown, and then go slow again. And some mums find that on the fast setting, the milk keeps flowing, and then on the fast setting, it's not. So, instead of just putting it on and let it do its program, see if you can just tutu a little bit with the settings and watch your flow of milk and watch what it does, and see if you can get a bit more out each time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I used to have to do. I used to have to move it around everywhere. I think we've got another one. Hi, 5 months of breastfeeding my baby, and I feel like my breast milk is drying up. It doesn't feel full anymore.
Okay. Yeah, and commonly, as the months kind of go on, our breasts just get more and more efficient at producing milk. So often milk production changes, and we don't feel that fullness anymore. But as long as the baby is still growing well, the nappies are still where they should be, and the feeding, you when the baby's on, you can still see the same drinking pattern and the same kind of behavior at the breast, then chances are it's just that your baby and your body's become more efficient. Sometimes when if we're starting to have longer breaks, particularly at night, we may start to ovulate again, which can start the hormone cycles in our body again. And for some women, when they start getting their period back, they can have some milk fluctuations. But if that were the case, you would notice, because your body's behavior and feeding patterns would change alongside it as well. But if you are worried that not just about the feeling, but about your baby's behavior and some of those other things at the breast, then yeah, please give us a call, and we can have a corridor, and I just break it all down to see whether, okay, it sounds like things might have slowed down for some reason, or no, I think everything's okay, and it's just that your body's responding better and more efficient.
Yeah, cool. So if whānau are wanting a video call lactation consultant, where would they? Obviously, PlunketLine, you can call us and we can book those in, but where else can parents get a hold of?
Yep. So all health professionals, I encourage all health professionals to know that they can refer into PlunketLine for IBCLC, or IBCLCs that don't have capacity to follow up. Please send them on to me and I can help with following them up. But yeah, on our website, or if you chuck into Google PlunketLine Lactation Consultants, then it will come up with our page, and you can just scroll down and click book now, and it will give you a calendar where you can choose an appointment, and then from that appointment you'll get sent a Teams invite, and on the day and time you just click on the link and I will appear.
That is awesome. I didn't know we were doing that. They're off the website. That's so cool.
Yeah,
That is so
really
cool.
easy.
That is so easy. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Tracey. This has been really cool. We've lasted a whole hour of me and you, and I think we could go for another like 20 or 30
Yes,
minutes.
we could.
But thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you to everybody for watching us and commenting. Is there anything you want to say, Tracey, to end it off?
No, thank you again, and happy World Breastfeeding Week to all the mums that have, that could, that wanted to and couldn't, that are, that's what Breastfeeding Week is about. And this year, getting back to works, we need a village, we need support, and yeah, awesome. That's me. Give me a call. Call us.
Yeah,
Come
call
and
us.
see me on video if you want to chat about going back to work and you've got some unique kind of struggles, and always happy to go through it.
Yeah, and even us PlunketLine nurses, we we have some tips and some information out there. So it might not even
Yeah.
be needing to go through to the lactation consultant.
No.
You might just have a nice cordial with one of us. We're
Yes.
definitely there as well. I think we'll also have some of the resources and websites to check out. In the message link as well. So if whānau want to have a look at that and have a look at some more information in that, I think they're going to be there as well.
Cool.
Awesome. All right.
Awesome. All right. Ka
All right.
kite.
Bye.
Bye.